In this episode, David is joined by Ross Hochwert to discuss some of the most impressive Zelda Speed Run moments. Hello and welcome to another Zelda podcast. I'm David, your host for tonight, and tonight I'm joined with a very special guest, Ross Hochwert. Did I say it right, Ross?
You did not.
Oh, I said it the wrong way before we said it's Hochwert.
We prepped for about 5 minutes.
Literally, like 40 seconds ago, I said, how do I pronounce your last name? And you told me, and I said it the wrong way.
Yep.
Ross, thanks for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Feels like an honor already.
Yeah, thanks for saying my name wrong. So, Ross, tonight we are going to be talking. First of all, actually, let's give people a little idea of who you are and why you're here and all of that. You were a coworker with my girlfriend for, I don't know, a year or so. And the three of us hung out a few months ago. We were just casually having dinner at like a Mexican restaurant here in Chicago. And you started kind of out of nowhere, started talking to me about Skyward Sword. And I was like, whoa, Gingsy's coworker is a Zelda fan. And then we kind of kept going, and you had fire in your eyes. You had passion in your eyes as you were talking about the time stones and Skyward Sword and all the rest. They kind of started giving me some ideas. And then long story short, you and I started talking, and we got excited about the idea of Zelda Speed Runs. And since you were back in town today, we had this opportunity to have you on the show so that we could do a speedrun episode. Isn't that right?
That's right. I think you nailed it 95%. Editorialized one bit of information.
Oh, what is it?
Gingsy is very much my boss.
She was? Is? She was. Colleague, coworker for sure, but very much my manager. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I didn't mean to make it all intimidating and all of that. I'm just joking around. No. Ross, I'm excited to be hanging out and to be building a top 10 speedruns list tonight. Speedruns are something that, for me, 900 years ago, 10 years ago, I bartended at like a nerd video game bar. Mm-hmm. And I was in Milwaukee. I really enjoyed it, bartending there for a couple of years. And we would, naturally in one of these kind of it wasn't an arcade bar. It was like a video game bar. Mm. And so there were many kiosks of, at the time, like Wii U's and PlayStation, whatever they were for. And, and you could kind of like take a disc and play it and that kind of thing. Like instead of pool tables, we had kiosks for playing games. And and then also there was opportunities for these 4 or 5 different kiosks to get put up on like the big screens. And whenever we had maybe a change in game that was being played for someone, and we needed some content up on the main screen, the bartenders could kind of pick what they wanted to put up. And I haven't ever told you this yet, but every single time I had the opportunity, I always queued up like a Zelda speed run. This is a decade before doing this podcast. This is before me being like a Zelda super fan, even though I guess it was already in my blood. And I had a blast. I'd put the Ocarina ones up. I'd put anything up, anything I could, because I wanted to watch them a lot of the times.
Sure.
For you, what caught your interest in speedruns in general?
That's fascinating. I think it is a way to just get more juice out of the squeeze of these video games.
Yeah.
Right? These video games are Ocarina of Time, 20, 25 years old at this point.
Yep.
And yet there are new glitches, new speedruns being developed every year.
It's true.
For a game that I used to play when I was 5 years old, 20 years ago or whatnot.
That reminds me, what was a lot of times, since our listeners don't know you're new to the show, what was kind of your introduction to the Legend of Zelda universe?
Yeah, so my mom, of all people, maybe I requested it, got me a video game, Ocarina of Time, for my 5th birthday.
Wow.
And I was with a buddy of mine, Billy, and he convinced me to play it that day. We open up the cartridge, throw it in.
Wow.
And he said that we should name our character Billy 5. Okay. On my birthday, my 5th birthday.
Well, yeah. All right. So,
and he was 4 at the time.
Creative fellow.
That's right.
Yeah,
and then I spent a good 6 months just trying to leave Kokiri Forest, not getting anywhere, not being able to leave the play area.
Yeah.
I think I put the game down for about a year when we got to one of the dungeons that was a little too scary for me. I think it was Zora's Domain.
Zora's Domain, that third one. Yeah.
Zora's Domain, final boss, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Well, so when we say Zora's Domain, are you thinking like Jabu situation?
Yeah. That was a little too scary for me.
It was the big tentacles, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
The electric tentacles were a little too much. We were dying very often, and I think I put it down. Maybe when I was 7 or 8, we pick it back up, and ended up beating it many years later.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
That's impressive. I did not realize we had such an age gap. Ocarina of Time came out when I was a senior in high school.
Okay,
and I played it into college.
Yeah.
But anyway, there it is.
There it is. We actually begged our parents to buy us the guides that would actually teach us how to beat the game. However, we didn't know how to read. So we would follow the pictures on the guides to solve the dungeon puzzles.
I love this.
And that's probably also why it took a very long time for us to beat the game.
But that's the best. That's the best. You know what I mean? I remember when I played Ocarina of Time, I did not have a guide or anything like that. The guides kind of started becoming popular in the early 2000s, in my opinion. And that was, I remember like there was Majora's Mask guides out. It was becoming more of a market. Yeah. And it was also, I think we were transitioning from like dial-up internet to what we would call real internet now, where you can legitimately pull up information, and even like the YouTube videos, obviously that's more 10 years ago. But when A Link to the Past came out, you'd be lucky to download like one article, and it would take minutes for it to load and minutes for pictures to show up. And so walkthroughs and anything like that didn't exist yet. It wasn't part of the culture, but I think the guides like began that. You know what I mean?
That's right. And by the time, let's just say Wind Waker came out, I was Googling for FAQs, which I was pronouncing as facts. And I thought that's what they were called. And I thought that meant walkthrough. I didn't realize that FAQ is actually frequently asked questions. So I'd be Googling these, hilarious ASCII, huge Zelda at the top of them in order to find out how to play the game.
I have memories of before they would start when it was just like rich text or whatever. It was just, you're just scrolling, looking for your header of like Jabu Jabu Belly or whatever it is. Exactly. For example. Wow, that's something. Well, I tell you what. Okay, so that's great. I do actually have a little bit of listener feedback here, if you don't mind. I want to kind of get into it. We I have about maybe 6 comments today, and this first one is over on iTunes. And I say this every single time we have an iTunes review. I'm tremendously grateful when people rate us and review us on iTunes, because Google Podcasts, Spotify, they also use ratings as part of their algorithm. But if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that is a large ping on the algorithm for popularity. And so I'm always very, very grateful. So this particular one here is from Zach, the Awful Waffle. And back on September 20th, so a few weeks ago, he said, he gave us a 5-star review, and he said, "Love the podcast. I'm a 13-year-old named Zach, and I've completed the first 3 games and Breath of the Wild. Not going to waste your time too much. See ya." Well,
that's adorable.
Zach the Awful Waffle, thank you so much for the rating and the review and all the rest. I absolutely love it. That's great. So over here, we have a little bit more. We recently had a quiz episode come out, and we always get a lot of feedback for that. And I think this next one here. Oh no, this is over on Instagram. This was actually a direct message on our Instagram account, where we are Another Zelda Podcast over on Instagram. And K Baird 23 DM'd us and said, "Hey, have you guys ever done a Majora's Mask episode? I'm a new listener to the pod and a big fan of Majora's Mask, and was curious if you guys had ever covered that game. Keep up the great work. I've really been enjoying the podcast. Glad to have found the show." Well, we're glad you found the show as well, K Bayard, BAIRD 23. So we actually kind of did do a Majora's Mask episode about 2 episodes ago. Stephanie Klimov is one of our blog writers, and she was in town. And so I sat down with her, and we actually discussed, it was kind of a deeper episode. We discussed how the metaphors of grief are expressed through Majora's Mask, the 5 stages and all of that. As far as a flat out Majora's Mask review episode, Ross, I got to say, I think that one's a ways off. I think because I really want to. So my main co-host, Kate, she did the Ocarina episode with me, and she has not played Majora's Mask much. She kind of got into it and was a little turned off by the time mechanic. But she has expressed to me like she's feeling it. She can get back in. But I still think that's like a season 5 situation. What's your relationship with Majora's Mask, if I may?
One of my favorites.
Ooh, I like it too.
And underrated, one of my favorites. I think, it comes out, it gets flack for using the same engine as Ocarina of Time. It's this depressing tragedy. There are some very dark moments throughout. it feels almost like life at times futile, right? It resets every 72 hours. The side quests that you finish are no longer finished, right? All you have is a mask to show for it. But in the eyes of the townspeople, it's like you were never even there. I loved all of that. I thought it created an amazing environment.
I'm so happy to hear that. I loved it too. I remember the first time I played Majora's Mask, I did not have any emotions of I think I was just so happy to be back in quote unquote Zelda after Ocarina. You know what I mean? And we all know that Nintendo just wanted to push out another Zelda really fast.
Sure.
They don't pretend that wasn't the case. They speak to it. But what was really exciting about Majora's Mask for me, if you look back at it, is that Eiji Aonuma was one of the developers for Ocarina of Time. But of course, there was a few other people that it was kind of like a team of people. When Nintendo wanted to make another Zelda and fast, because there was some complications actually there was going to be like a Master Quest, the Yura Zelda thing was kind of happening in Japan, and maybe they were going to release like what we would call like an expansion pass or DLC these
64
days.
64 DD, right?
Well, it was for 64 DD over in Japan. You're absolutely right. The American version was going to maybe be a second cartridge or something. There was a lot of talk, but it didn't come together. And in the meantime, they really wanted another Zelda to come out. And so Eiji Aonuma, apparently, the story goes, and I guess I'm paraphrasing. This is hearsay, but Nintendo reached out to him. Eiji Aonuma is perhaps in the community very famous for being the one of the head designers, if not the designer of the water temple in Ocarina of Time.
All right. A legend in his own.
Yes, indeed. And I think the water temple's phenomenal. I think it's supposed to be difficult. I do think they've made a couple nice tweaks in the 3D remake that came out, a couple user interface informative kind of things that help. But my favorite thing about Eiji Aonuma is he loves making what's called puzzle box dungeons where the whole dungeon is the puzzle, literally,
Hence water dungeon.
Yeah. So did you got to the water dungeon when around 7 or 10 then, I guess, based on your story. Huh?
I think the guide was very much leading us through at that point.
The guide helped on that one.
I don't think at 28 years of age I could solve it today without massive amounts of hours of investment.
Sometimes it turns into just a lot of laps. You're doing a lot of laps through that dungeon, and eventually you kind of find like another little thing to ping or another thing to play your ocarina at. But anyway, I got to reel this in, but Eiji Aonuma stepped forward as the main designer for Majora's Mask. And so knowing that they had to use all the same assets, he has spoken to this in interviews. He's spoken about how he really wanted to just do something totally different and really kind of express something that was emotional. And I think it's cool. I think Majora's Mask can't exist without Ocarina. And I'm happy it does exist.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Did you get through Majora's Mask, or was another one of these couple years things?
I think at that point we were old enough, my buddy and I, who always play together, to beat it, within a normal, call it 6-month period, less than 60 hours.
Yeah.
No, we loved it.
It was great. I enjoy the 3DS remake. There were some changes. Love and hate some of them, but that's fine. Happy I can play it on the go for now. Let's see. So thank you very much, Chris Bayard 23. Let's move on to this one. I got to zoom in for this one. This is a comment over on YouTube this is a comment over on our Instagram page. In fact, it's regarding the Zelda mangas that I have right here on my desk, which I know I showed you and you were kind of perusing it before we were recording here. So there's an Ocarina of Time manga out there that was made a long time ago, maybe back in the 90s or something like that. And then about, as I understand it, roughly 10 years ago, a Twilight Princess manga was produced in Japan, and it's being re-released in America kind of right now. In fact, I kind of accidentally found volume 1 in a bookstore and thought, oh, this is curious. Sure, I'll try it. And I started reading it. I loved it. Well, now I'm hooked. And so I'm on Amazon grabbing the next volume every week or so. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So with that said, though, we have a comment about a picture that I took on our Instagram account of one of the volumes here. I'm just kind of showing you on the show.
Sure.
Just a little artsy little Instagram-y type photo. And it says here, Dangerous Facade says, "Hey guys, been a fan of the podcast for a few years now. And as a manga collector, I love seeing you talk about the LOZ manga. One of the most fun parts of all the manga based on the games is that Link has a voice. So you get to experience it in a whole different way. I think there's a typo there. In a whole different way. I'd love to see you guys make an episode on the manga and the differences between the games and the manga. Personally, the Twilight Princess manga and the Majora's Mask manga are my favorite. I didn't even know there was a Majora's Mask one. I got to check that out.
Yeah.
I tell you when I find it, Ross, I'm going to send you a link. All right.
I think my favorite part of this comment, right, that Link does not have a voice.
Yeah.
And for researching this episode, is it okay if I say the topic or?
Yeah, please. I think we spoke to how we're doing the top 10 list.
So
that was real early
so
on.
We're doing a top 10 speedrunning, and I was looking at some of the comments on YouTube, and people, I think one of my favorite comments in all these speedruns is, Link wakes up, let's just say Breath of the Wild, grabs a sword, and then 15 minutes later goes to Ganon without saying a word and destroys him. And, it's without saying a word.
Right. Yeah. And canonically, Link does speak. He even technically speaks in the games, just they choose to not present it.
That's right.
So that we can, kind of put our own person on him.
Did you enjoy the voice acting in Breath of the Wild for the characters that did?
I was fine with it.
Yeah.
I was fine with it. I would say that, I will say this. I think I enjoyed that there was voice acting in Breath of the Wild. I was perfectly happy reading all the in-world stuff.
Yeah.
But the cutscenes, some people debate if they were good or bad, performed well or poor or whatever. For me, it worked. It was fine.
I skipped most of them.
Yeah.
I found them to be a detraction, actually.
A detraction? Okay.
Yeah, I just felt like it kind of interrupted the pace of the story for me.
I have come to learn that the first time I played Breath of the Wild, I found all the memories and stuff dramatically out of order.
Yeah.
So for me, it was almost like a season of Lost. I was kind of like, what's happening? Because it was it was like the story itself was simple, but I was getting the information in such a disjointed way.
Yeah.
I was interested in that. But even on my second playthrough, by accident, I found them in a slightly more, like if you go to YouTube and watch them all in order, you're like, okay, that's fine. You know?
No, I think I'm in the same boat. And I get that Zelda was upset constantly, but I think it could be frustrating in a while. I didn't know the origin of her, upsetness and not being able to harness the powers that she needed.
Yeah.
So I was fed up. So I started skipping the memories.
Wow. I mean, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Over here on YouTube, on Facebook, Ian Yates says, I love this podcast. It's in reference to an episode where we talked about the top 10 antagonists in the Zelda series. Zant was in there. Obviously, Ganon was in there. And I think Bongo Bongo was in there. I think there was an episode I did with Kate. I love this podcast. I've been listening to all of them over the last few weeks. Great ideas regarding Bongo Bongo. Really got me thinking about the unwritten and can't help but see the Yiga clan symbol, in the image of Bongo Bongo. The Bongo Bongo is, of course, the final boss when you go down into the spirit dungeon.
Correct.
I almost said the bottom of the well.
No.
You're close,
similar.
But not quite.
Yeah, that's right.
In the spirit dungeon. And, honestly, so the Yiga clan symbol is the Sheik symbol, or not the Sheik, the Sheikah symbol upside down. And I don't know, maybe I'm going to show you a picture here of Bongo Bongo. I guess when you think about his red face there and the tears and everything going up, I think I could see the connection.
I could see it.
Yeah, a little bit of that. That's very cool. Well, thank you very much, Ian Yates. We've actually heard from Ian before. We always appreciate those comments. And let's see, I have 2 left, and then we're going to get to our top 10. Over here on YouTube, Hi, my name is Neo, said, this podcast deserves to be the biggest Zelda podcast. The level of detail, dedication, and true love for the series really shows. Much love to all the AZP crew. Love psychological takes on topics. This is great. Oh! This was a comment about our Majora's Mask episode, my recent Majora's Mask episode. Curious, is there a way to apply to be a guest, even if for just one question? Take care, everyone, and may the goddess smile upon you. Well, that's interesting. Hi, my name is Neo. I wonder if there's a way that we could somehow incorporate listeners with some of these quiz episodes we do, or something, if I may. Or maybe we could do like a mega. Well, anyways, we don't have to have a production meeting right now, but maybe there is a way to reach out to some of our listeners and have them contribute to the show more than just comments.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Hi, my name is Neo. We appreciate that. Jack Faulkner, lastly, over here in reference to our Video Game Summit episode, in which we did a live Zelda quiz in front of a live audience. It was terrifying because this is not a live. We don't do this show live.
Sure.
There was echo. There was reverb. There was, we learned a lot with that episode, and I'm excited to do more live shows, but I think that's going to be more of a season 5 thing. I have to be honest, more like a next year kind of thing as the world comes back, so to speak. Jack Faulkner here says, another podcast episode already? Count me in. Guess I know what I'll be listening to for the next half an hour. Along with the top 10 lists, the quizzes have become some of my favorite episodes. And it's awesome to hear more of the AZP family having fun together. Oh, because we did have a couple of our blog writers join us for that quiz episode.
Oh, very fun.
Yeah, the quiz episodes were they're a weird journey for us. They kind of came up in a way that we didn't expect, and they're becoming a thing that people really like.
I mean, there must be so much trivia out there. You could.
I think there's a little bit of that, like the listener can play along. It's kind of fun.
It's a little bit of Jeopardy at home. See what answers I would know.
Yeah, I like it. If there's a way that we could, we're still learning a lot about how to produce these quiz episodes. Because if I may, honestly, Russ, the production demands are almost 5 times more what a regular episode is
for the quiz.
Yeah, for the quiz. Because if you're doing it live, there's a ton of production demands to literally set up a stage. You're doing not a rock concert, but you're doing a concert. I mean, you have to have a live soundboard, all that stuff. It's so much more than like even what we're doing here in this studio here now, where all of the audio is done post-production. Like I'm recording your signal, my signal, but all of that goes into an editor system later on and gets dealt with. If we do it as a normal quiz episode, everybody's submitting their answers. There's files all over the place and all of that you can imagine.
Yeah.
But also, this person said that their favorite other episodes are top 10 episodes. So I say, let's get into it.
Here we go.
So top 10 speedruns. I got to say, Ross, this is something that I'm very passionate about. No, very excited about. But besides like always bringing them up and just kind of loving to watch them, and the occasional YouTube video that might speak to like some cool boundary break that happened 10 years ago or something, I'm not part of the community. I don't really like watch the streams right now. I think it's really fascinating. But what's your relationship with speedruns? We're going full circle all the way back to that first question I asked you.
Sure. I think my relationship with speedruns is a bit of a lagging indicator. I'm not on the bleeding edge. I'm the kind of guy who will watch the videos a year after they come out and say, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not watching the streams either.
I see. It is fascinating. So anyway, we each picked 5 tonight, as we do normally with a top 10 episode for a show like this. And what we'll do is we'll go, I guess you could say 5 to 1, meaning we're picking moments in speedrunning. So not just specific speedruns, but maybe if there was a moment where a certain glitch was exposed or something. That's at least kind of how I picked my 5.
That's how it is.
You too?
Yeah.
And so we might be speaking about certain speedrunners. And as of the recording, we might speak to certain speedrunners being at the top of a list or breaking a record. And of course, that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this as speedrun moments, because it's not the current or the best speedrunners or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, I'm inclined. I've been talking a lot, and I kind of want to get you talking.
Sure.
I think we'll do this. Why don't we have you give me your 5, and then I'll do my 5. You do your 4. I'll do my 4. We'll take a break. Okay. When we come back from the break, let's swap it, and I'll start with 3. That way, you can have the final word here with your number 1. Sound good?
It's an honor. It's an honor to have the final word, Dave. I appreciate it. You treat me like a king here.
All right. So let's see. What did you pick as your least exciting but still very exciting speedrun moment?
I can't say least exciting. It is very exciting, but I'm with you here. So let me add a little bit of context before I throw it out here.
Sure.
As I mentioned, my first video game was Ocarina of Time, and the speedrunning moment comes from Ocarina of Time. I was a wee lad, called 5 years old when this game came out. And as you know, the first area they put you in, this little play area, is Kokiri Forest. You got to get the sword, you got to get the shield, you have to go to the Deku tray, you got to stamp out the violence there. And then only after all that can you kind of go through and pass Mido into the overworld, normal world.
Yeah, I think technically Mido to the tree, but you're absolutely right. Then it's Saria. But anyway,
that's right. And
I just push up my glasses there.
No, that's right. And so Mido to the tree is kind of that final blocker, right? They won't let you go through.
Right.
You go left, he goes left. He's like a mime, right? Creating this barrier for you.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out my 5th favorite, most exciting speedrunning glitch.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Are you gonna guess?
I mean, is it the boundary break through Mido?
It's the escape the forest glitch. That's right.
Tell us all about it.
Through Mido. So, I mean, what's there to say? But you, as a kid, it holds a special place in my heart that I was trying to roll. I was trying to throw a bomb. I was trying to attack him with a sword. I'm a 5-year-old who doesn't understand the dynamics of a video game. How would I?
This guy's in my way. I know I can get around him. Instead of as an adult, they're saying like, okay, obviously the programmers programmed this, so we can't go. I'll move on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the fact that speedrunners, now there's a dozen different ways to get past him, bombing, clipping, name it. But the fact that there's a way to break through that initial barrier that as a child, months of my time was spent fruitlessly doing in kind of insane activities. That's number 5 on my list.
I love it. That's great. So how did you come to be exposed to it? Did you have to research it, or were you generally somewhat aware of this one? Because there were a few for me that I had to like flat out research.
I think I knew about this trick. There were a few on my list I had to research as well. But I think you just see it in the speed runs and you just go, oh my God, that's incredible. You just hold your head and you say, I cannot believe again that this took me months to get through, and yet this speedrunner clips through the wall and just keeps going.
I'm just working off memory here, but isn't there something where if you you can, if you get bombed, you can kind of bomb yourself past a collision check or something like that.
That's
Doesn't that
right.
happen from time to time?
That's right. I
Yeah.
think I think that's the most common. It was something about a bombing past.
Cool. Oh my gosh, great. Well, my fifth here is kind of classic. Whenever I'm trying to find things in the Zelda timeline, I try to go all the way back to maybe the original game as well. And so one of my moments that I've picked was with the original The Legend of Zelda, and only a few years ago, if I understand it. Oh, also, let's speak to the difference between an any percent speed run, 100%, or also a low percent.
Sure.
Which is kind of a newer category in the community, I think. I don't want to speak to actually knowing that, but for me, it's a new one, the low percentage. So an any percent means that as long as the player, general rules of a speed run, even though there's a lot of different categories out there, but generally the idea is without assists or game genies or game sharks, can you, within the construct of the game, within the code of the game, can you get to the credits, the endpoint, or whatever's deemed by the community as the endpoint? And there are some modifiers out there of like glitchless runs where you're really just executing on the skill. But quite frankly, sometimes running these glitches takes more skill than actually playing the game. Even like the Mido skip, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I could do that.
I would say every glitch I have on this list is absolutely something that took someone hours to perfect. They're at the right angle. They're looking at the right sign. They're using some heuristic. This should be in the top left corner of the screen, and then maybe you're at the right angle. But even then, this is precision. I think these guys are very talented, and it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I agree completely. I agree. And it's like a whole completely different layer of, or like even speaking to like some of the, just if I may, like these Breath of the Wild, not necessarily speed runs, but these kind of glitch hacks that you'll see when people are doing combat and Breath, it blows my mind. Anyways, what I'd like to talk about is a moment where a gentleman, and oh my gosh, I put his name down, Lack Attack here a couple years back, at the time got the world record for the fastest speed run in the original Legend of Zelda. And he got it down to like, I think 27 minutes, and it was at 36 minutes for the longest time. It might have even gone down a little bit more, but he used it wasn't a single massive glitch, of which I have a few of those on my list here. It was really just more like an execution of, it's interesting with these 8-bit games because they don't have a lot of memory. And sometimes I guess you could say the data banks that cache the literal variables that decide if you're holding a sword or if you have a bomb in your inventory. Sometimes those were literally just 16 bits and it was like a 1 or a 0 if you had the bomb or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so once in a while, some of this stuff can be, sometimes it can literally be rewritten with certain in-game rewritten by doing little hacks and exploits. But in this case, this was a situation where Lack Attack basically figured out a way to execute what would otherwise seem random occurrences in the game to introduce them as something that could be predicted. So I'll just try to talk to that real quick. So first of all, one of the things he did, he was doing this thing called screen scrolling, and it's so you might remember the original Legend of Zelda game along with Link's Awakening and kind of A Link to the Past. When you hit the edge of the screen, everything would scroll over to the left, right, up, down, or whatever. And that was because of memory things and stuff like that back in the day. Well, that original Legend of Zelda was supposed to be a dungeon crawler. It was supposed to be only the dungeons. And then later they went on and designed this overworld. But anyway, I digress. There's a weird thing that happens in the original The Legend of Zelda. And there are, with a Nintendo game, it's basically a collection of 16 pixel by 16 pixel sprites.
Yeah.
Oh, 16 pixels. I wonder if that's like a 8-bit, 16 bits of not a 16-bit system, but that actually kind of lines up now, actually. But apparently there's the way that Link moves along we'll call it the grid of the screen. For some reason, the way the math works out is he actually moves like a pixel and a half, or it basically ends on a half, what would be a theoretical half pixel every movement. And so it's only every other piece of movement or animation frame or whatever, he lands on like a real number. So what the system does, what the designers did is they basically have him almost snap to grid. So if he moves, they'll snap him over. Yeah. And there's a way to exploit that snap essentially. So if you get to the edge of a screen and you're 5 pixels away from a thing and you go forward and back, you can kind of trick the snap and Link will actually reset to the other side of a screen. So he's screen scrolling like crazy just to like pass bad guys. Which is interesting just to figure out because they had to, they had to like map out and figure out all these pixels and how the motion even works. But the thing that was a little bit more interesting to me is that when he enters, for example, dungeons, specifically, he actually went to the 4th dungeon in this particular run before going to the 1st dungeon. Because if I may, as a side note here, one of my other bullet points is it was really important for him to have the raft in the beginning so that many of the other dungeons, including the 1st dungeon, he could skip over those little water parts.
Oh,
you may or may not be aware of like the little raft that lets you skip one block of water in that original game.
Sure.
I know you kind of started with Zelda with Ocarina, so I don't want to like...
I think I had a copy of the original on my BlackBerry.
Whoa, we speak not of it, good sir.
So...
You did not purchase that game?
So my dad had a BlackBerry. He was upgrading. He's like, Ross, you can take my old one. It was my first non-brick cell phone. I had like a Nokia up until then. And first, I don't know how, but somehow I was able to download this Legend of Zelda file, which turned out to be a reproduction of the original game on a BlackBerry of all places, using the little ball to scroll left and right.
Oh, to like move?
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
Wow.
And
well, I'm not going to judge you too hard here, Ross.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you were like out to duplicate the ROM and get it all over the place or anything like that.
For the listeners at home, David just held up a sign that says, Ross, I'm judging you very hard right now, with Sharpie on a white 8.5
And then I flip the sign over and it says, pay for your games.
That's right.
I'm joking.
You wouldn't steal a car, right?
But anyways, but that is kind of neat that you had a little bit of exposure to it, and super weird that someone out there got it running on a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, yeah, okay. I was about to speak to like ROMs getting put on weird devices, but I don't think that's a different episode for another time and all of that. All right. So anyway, let's see here. So Lack Attack, one of the biggest ways that he was able to move so fast or execute the game is because whenever you go into a dungeon in the original Zelda game, the enemies spawn for each room spawn in seemingly random orientations and spots and directions, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
You go into the first room and there's 3 dark nuts and one's going left, right, and one's going up, down, okay, and they change their grid system. But it turns out that, and maybe you actually know a little bit about this, I'm not sure, but a lot of times it's actually really hard for computers to make random numbers because there usually needs to be some kind of, it has to start from somewhere.
There's a seed.
Yeah, there has to be a seed.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. Do you have any experience with this or anything? I'm really not sure what exactly.
You know, I was a computer science major in school.
Yeah.
And we had a whole topic on random because you're right. Random is not a concept that a computer can do. Right. A computer, it's based things in ones and zeros. There's nothing about that is random. And so everything is pseudo random. And you're right. And one of the cool things I learned in that class is that random is very hard. And one of the elements that some computer randomizers will use is actually the ambient temperature of the processor.
Oh, that's great.
And the idea is that the ambient temperature will be, another random variable, as well as taking, pi and taking some random number within pi.
Because they're basically taking data, metadata, not metadata like that, but like data from outside the context of the calculations. It's the temperature of the room, which the computer cannot control.
That's right. And if you believe that the temperature of the room is somewhat uniform, meaning, your chance of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 0 is about 1/10 for each. There's 10 digits, 10 numbers. And if you think that it's a good approximation, then yeah, you can use the ambient temperature along some other variables to get to a pseudo random number. Right. But otherwise, it is a literally impossible task.
You can't you can't make random broad strokes here, but you can't make a random number on a computer.
That's right.
I know there's some other companies. I remember on some game developer or something out there, they were talking about creating their random numbers based on the XY coordinates of the cursor.
Yep.
And then they would grab it again, and essentially the velocity would then become that random seed number. So you couldn't just always put it in the same spot of the screen and get whatever.
Yeah.
That's how this other company found their random numbers. Well, anyway, the Legend of Zelda has basically uses a random seed number to place these characters, but it's not random at all. It is, just a minute, every single frame, there is a list of numbers, and every single frame cues another number. There's a preset. They just, I'm speculating. They just typed in numbers. You know what I mean? They being the developers just typed in numbers, and there is a list, is a data set long enough that for every frame, this data set lasts 9 minutes. So it's just a 9 minute, so what is it? 30 times a second. I think technically it might even be 60 frames a second on that original Zelda game. It's debatable. That's a lot of numbers. But they just maybe they used a different system to type this stuff in. But anyways, it is a baked in data set. And what happens is that number just starts counting from the beginning. And I guess they're thinking like, well, no one's going to go into a dungeon on the exact same frame. That would be crazy. But of course, that's what speedrunners do, is they find the frames to make this stuff all line up. So there was this way where Lack Attack was able to get to a certain point of the frame being, I think maybe this data set would re-execute on every scroll, now that I think about it. So every time there was a new screen that essentially loaded, it would start running. And he used a music cue, because the music is not a WAV file back then. It's being executed by code as well. He could use a music cue to know a few frames later to like enter this dungeon. And there's also this detail about technically the system averages 4 frames when Link is entering a dungeon, so that you get a 4-frame window to execute this number. But anyways, Lack Attack figured out how to enter. I mean, this melts my brain. He and perhaps the community figured out the best orientation of the bad guys to where in which they are the least in your way to go through the dungeon, what seed number that is, and what frame they should enter, so that they could randomly, quote unquote, run from door to door and there wouldn't be a bad guy in the way. Can you even imagine the amount of backwards engineering that it takes to figure that out? I
mean, I hope at that point, Lack Attack or someone did open up the source code, because otherwise it's just trial and error, right?
It's trial and error, and you're an insane person, and I commend you, but that's crazy.
That's right. And I think to myself, I think about this a lot with Super Smash Brothers, another Nintendo franchise. They're not building the game for the speedrunners. They're not even building it oftentimes for the die hard fans.
Yeah.
They're writing for the 99.99% of people who will buy a copy of this and just want a fun game.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will put in these data structures and algorithms that maybe can be hacked like this, but of course they don't care. But in that negligence, it opens up the window to the speedrunning community.
Yeah.
So if anything, the speedrunning community has to thank I won't say lazy developers, but the developers who are prioritizing everyone but them for their opportunity to speedrun.
25, 30 years ago, if I was making an 8-bit game and I needed to have something feel random, and I don't even know how many thousands of numbers in a data set, I would say, yeah, that's good enough.
That's right. And at the time, video games were so much smaller at the time, and did not have the global scale. But yet today, Breath of the Wild still has all those glitches or whatnot.
Yeah.
At much bigger scale. And I truly think the developers, they're not lazy, but they maybe part of them is thinking, I'm going to keep this a little bit open door. There's a back way in. And let's see who figures it out. You
will hear about there are developers of Breath of the Wild out there that have acclaimed the people that have figured out these super advanced slight glitch ways to do combat and stuff like that. When you're just clipping through a polygon or something, fine, cool. But when people are figuring out if you're in slow-mo mode and your shield hits this and you hit this other thing and you drop your sword and go into the menu and pick up a different sword, then you fly into the air. Honestly, there's been public declarations of some of the developers saying this is awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is great.
It reminds me, there's all these videos online, 25 things you still didn't know about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, coming out years after the game. I'm sure you've watched them.
Yeah, I think they have 4 or 5 of them at this point, whatever that channel is.
That's right. And what you're describing, this, back end routine to kind of hack the game, there are programmed versions that developers want you to find, right? You'll bring a frozen fish to a certain place, show it to Lizalfos, and they'll do a dance, something like that. Yeah. That years later, and again, my favorite comment on YouTube is always someone saying, can you imagine this developer who worked on this for 5 years, finally 5 years after the game comes out, someone finds this very specific pattern and is able to execute and, get the Lizalfos to dance.
Yeah, I love it. And sometimes, sometimes it's 20 years and something comes out, and once in a while a developer might have to leak a little thing. But anyway, I have one more thing to speak about. Please. This where things are random but not random. This is less impressive than 9 minutes of frames of data, perhaps. But I never knew this, but item drops in the original Legend of Zelda game are not random because they can't be, as we've already discussed. So there is actually a grid system. What happened was the developers basically created an A tier, a B tier, a C tier, and a D tier of baddies, of bad guys.
Yep.
Maybe easy, medium hard, and really hard. And then created I think it's 16. No, it looks like it's 9 here. 9, that's an odd number for data. But anyway, a 9 single bit, data set here that is that just cycles through. So there's a slight random if there's a drop. I guess there's some other number quote unquote randomizing if there's a drop. But the series of what gets dropped, be it a rupee or a bomb or a heart actually is a
pattern.
pattern.
It's in order. It's
yeah.
a pattern. Oh,
yeah, I have it right here, and I'm going to read a few of them out to you.
Sure.
So like with the A tier, which is basically Octoroks and I see a Moblin on here and even a Tektite and stuff like that. It goes, the item drop order is diamond, heart, or rupee, pardon me. Rupee, heart, rupee, fairy, rupee, heart, rupee, heart. Fair enough. And then, for example, the D tier bad guys. So the ones that are really, I see like the red or the blue Zoras, blue Lionels, stuff like that. Like the harder characters that aren't quite bosses. This is what the order is: heart, fairy, rupee, heart, fairy, heart, rupee, heart. So obviously a lot more hearts and stuff. So they're kind of curving what you get back, but those drops are not random. And so Black Attack, of course, obviously exploited that as well and could actually attack in a certain way. So much so that when he does his speed runs, he must be doing it with code or something, but he has a little counter up top counting A, B, C, and D and where he is on that grid so that he can know what to get next because he might know he needs a bomb for blah, blah, blah.
That's fascinating. I come from, the corporate world before I went back to school here. And all I can think about is when you show me this, pattern.
Yeah.
Alice and Bob, or more likely a Japanese developer, getting into a conference room and talking about what should the pattern be. Alice comes in with her Excel sheet, says, you know what? I think it should go rupee, heart, rupee. Bob says, you know what? I actually know about that. I think it should go rupee, heart. They're going back and forth. This takes about 3 weeks to get through. Management has to come in, right? And there's a director involved. I mean, the meetings, right? For something so arbitrary.
Have you considered 4 rupees?
Okay, now we have to start from scratch.
Yeah, let's test
now we have
that.
To start over.
We got to test it.
That's right.
That's crazy. So, anyways, I got a little carried away there, but mostly what I wanted to speak to is how much is not random if you're at this expert level in the original The Legend of Zelda. So much so that if you understand the quote unquote randomness, you can literally play it like an instrument.
Exactly.
Isn't that cool?
I think the same thing. I have one of my friends is a lawyer. He's a litigator, and he says you should never ask someone on the witness stand a question you don't always know the answer to. Randomness is your enemy. You should play the court like a fiddle, right? You should play it like an instrument.
I see.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. What is your fourth speed run moment? Oh, did I kind of surprise you with it?
No.
Okay.
I just want to pull it up again.
Mm-hmm.
So this one's Wind Waker. And I'll start with the title and we'll talk about why it's meaningful to me. So this one, you probably see where I'm going with this. It's the barrier break.
I'm so happy you brought it up because it was my honorable mention.
Okay. So it's the barrier break. And for the listeners at home, Wind Waker early on in the game takes you to effectively what becomes the final level, right? They take you to Hyrule Castle below the sea.
Yes.
And I'm looking to David to not have approval because I already messed up in the Mido, and so I want to make sure.
Oh, you're fine.
Moving forward, that we're
you didn't mess up. You didn't mess up. It was you misspoke, and I was just being a nerd.
No, I love it. And so you go down in the boat, below the sea to Hyrule Castle, which at the end of the game you find out is where Ganondorf is. Where your final battle with Ganondorf occurs, and you can actually walk close to Hyrule Castle until you hit this barrier. And for years and years and years, the speedrun committee was saying, if only we could go past the barrier, we would jump hours. And as we know, Wind Waker is a very tedious game. Yeah. Even with all the hacks, it's still very tedious.
That second half gets a little slow.
That's right. And so if we could break through this barrier, we could skip and we could go deeper into Ganondorf's castle and beat the game effectively, shaving hours off.
Yes. And I think this barrier was expressed as like a literal blue, field or something. Isn't that right? It wasn't an invisible wall, but I think it was part of the language of the game. Isn't that right?
That's right. And so when you're down there, it depends on what time you're down. It could either be black and white or color. So when it's black and white, it's kind of a little bit gray, but you walk into it and it's infinite damage bounces you back. It doesn't actually damage you, but you bounce back. Okay. So I was watching a video about it and apparently the developers, knowing that this was, could be, maybe they were trying to think about the hackers here, they ended up building actually 2 barriers. And so the setup is there's an infinite damage barrier going around.
Wow.
And then an invisible wall just before, just behind the barrier.
I see.
And this invisible wall and the barrier extended infinitely upward. So you couldn't use any hacks to get above. And then mostly downward, down to the level, but there's no way either. And so it turns out that the speedrun community, this almost became a meme. That people would post these fake videos of them breaking past the barrier, saying, "Oh my God, I did it!" And of course, I'll be wrong. Oh, you already beat the game. This is clearly mock footage or whatnot.
Yes.
Until one day, one person, after thousands of experiments, I'd have to imagine thousands of iterations, found a way to look exactly at the right angle. With a certain heuristic in the top left corner that would indicate that you're at that right angle.
Right.
Something with a hook shot, and you can kind of clip through the boundary.
Yes.
And immediately shave 2 hours off of the 100% time or the 80% time at that point.
I think it happened on the HD version for what it's worth.
Exactly. It happened on the HD version.
Yeah.
And that to me, for a person who, again, I really like the Wind Waker, but it is such a tedious game. I love almost the sticking it to the developers, who I have no relationship with, but I hope would find me to be a friendly person. But the fact you can skip through and not have to pick up 9 Triforce shards and not have to go in your boat for hours and hours and hours and just clip right through.
Fair enough.
It means a lot to me.
Yeah, and that's one of those, I guess, boundary breaks or whatever. That's one of those clips that extra challenge there, the fact that there are 2 invisible walls, because I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe in playtesting some people did try to push through, or you're right, maybe just some developer said, hey, we got to be careful, because essentially getting to the other side, your coordinates essentially triggers the last battle, but it also doesn't warp you because it doesn't happen on that bridge.
I think it warps you past the bridge, but then you can just walk in to the final battle.
I see, and
it'll trigger the cutscene from there.
Yeah, okay,
something like that.
The big old staircase or whatever it is. Wow. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I have a Wind Waker one as well, which I'm really excited about, and it happened post the big barrier break.
I think I have an idea.
Ooh, interesting. Well, we'll get there. I don't think I have that one.
Okay.
Until after the break. So I took a long time with my number 5, so I'm going to go a little quicker here for number 4. And actually, that's fitting because this glitch makes the game that I'm about to talk about be one of the quickest speed runs in Zelda history. There's actually 2 speed runs that come to mind that have very fast possible executions of getting to the end point. But I'm going to speak not about the A Link to the Past one, where you can kind of in that first castle jump off a certain wall and then basically go up a couple layers and you're at Ganon. I'm going to talk about one that I did not know about until I researched for this episode, the Link's Awakening glitch. Yeah, there is a Link's Awakening glitch that will essentially turn the game into a 6-minute experience. And the way it works is it's called the dog. Well, the main glitch is what's been titled the doghouse glitch.
Okay.
And the doghouse is, of course, are you familiar with Link's Awakening a little bit?
I played it when it came out on the Switch.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So you at least got the chain chomp and you
correct.
Yeah, all of that. Okay. So that's the doghouse there. And you also know that you need to go down to the first thing you typically do is you go down to the beach and get your sword and your shield and all that kind of stuff. Well, to beat the game, to beat one of the final bosses, you do technically need to have arrows. I'm fast forwarding all the way to going into the egg. You're at the end of the game. There's kind of a gauntlet of like 5 or 6 different baddies. It's one baddie, but it's a boss that morphs into these different things. Ganon, the Shadow of Ganon, is even one of these iterations. But there's one character that has like these long arms, so you have to shoot it in the eye with arrows. Of course, you don't normally get the bow and arrow until much later in the game in Link's Awakening. And usually you have to buy it, and it's like 900 rupees or something. I think it's like really expensive. Or you can steal it. I think you know about the stealing thing in Link's Awakening. You can technically go into the shop, and if you're quick enough and you run around the shopkeeper, you can steal things, and they call you thief for the rest of the game. Well, anyway, the way this speed run is executed is you start the game off normal, and I personally saw it happen on the Link's Awakening DX version, and I bet it doesn't work on like the Switch remake. You know what I mean? Because even though they used all the same,
they patch it very often.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a different engine and everything like that. So at least executed on Link's Awakening DX, you get your shield because you need your sword and shield. You get your shield right in the beginning, just like normal. And then you need the shield to get through those Tektites or those little spiny guys to get to your sword down in the down by the beach. And then it's actually technically even quicker to then die at the beach and then start your file over from the house. From the house, you take Link and you go to the shop. The arrows are not available yet because what is available before the arrows, logically in the game, is the shovel. So you grab the shovel, you steal the shovel, and then I think you quit the game and restart again, and you can go right back into the store and steal the bow and arrow. Essentially, there's the technicality if you go back into the store if you don't save and quit, obviously the storekeeper just gets mad and like zaps you or shocks you or whatever. But anyway, so now Link can have the sword, the shield, and the arrows, which is all he needs to defeat these final bosses technically. and he also only has 3 hearts. Having 20 hearts is much easier, but if you got the skill, you can do it with 3 hearts. So there's a way to go up to right there in that opening village, to go up to behind the dog house, and essentially, I didn't even see any like crazy bomb stuff. You kind of can just like clip in by wedging through a couple tile sets, and essentially what happens is this clip executes. So one of the things that happens, so the original The Legend of Zelda, people think about the overworld as a map, and then people think about the 8 dungeons. They're called levels in that game, but you know what I mean. What a lot of people don't realize is that those 8 dungeons in the original Legend of Zelda are actually just another map of the same size as the overworld. And the developers just placed, almost like weird Tetris pieces, placed all the dungeons in there.
Sure.
So when you go into a dungeon or any interior, you're technically just loading the second map, and they just put link to the correct coordinates.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they can kind of keep those 2 data. They don't have to like load a new dungeon. You see where I'm going with this. It's almost like how sprite sheets work. But anyway, Link's Awakening works the exact same way. And so what happens is this glitch technically executes the quote unquote interior map, and you're basically in like a really messed up glitchy version of the interiors of some dungeons. And if I don't know, the community figured this out eventually, but if you walk certain ways, you walk up 5 screen tiles and right 4 screen tiles, blah blah blah, and also the graphics don't line up with what you're actually seeing, so there's a lot of trial and error. So there's you might be walking, because it's also like a glitched version, because I'm sure the variables, the fingerprint of the variables aren't lining up with the way they should. So if you're supposed to be loading a rock tile in this version, that same coordinate is actually loading, I don't know, who knows, water or something, right? You see where I'm going with this? So it's all kind of messy, but you can technically get to that final pit by the egg and jump in. Okay, fine. Once you jump in, then it is basically you've queued up the game back into a non-glitchy version, and you're in there doing the final boss battle with only a sword, a shield, and arrows, and 3 hearts. After that, it's all skill. After that, there's a lot of skill. There's a lot of like getting up and doing, you don't have your Pegasus boots. You can't do the big charge thing. So now it's more like that high skill level combat stuff where it's a lot of sword spins and power attacks and getting up on a sprite just as they're loading to stun them, and then wailing away to get through these 5 or 6 different tiers. But when done right, it's about a 6-minute game. And
That's
there it
incredible.
is. The thing that was interesting to me about it was that it exploits loading the alternate tile set, or the alternate map, you could say, the interior map.
Yeah.
Which of course does not geographically line up with what's happening on the outside map. They just need another 30 by 30 tile set, or screen set to keep these other dungeons loaded up in. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that last point that you brought up, that once you're in the egg, it's all skill. Every one of these speedruns you watch, they start and end with 3 heart containers or whatever the average is.
Right.
You forget that these players, while incredible at their technical skill to clip through a whatever, are also incredible being these bosses that probably you or I died to many times without the right potions, with 10 heart containers instead of 15 or instead of 20, and yet they're coming in, no armor, 3 hearts, a couple arrows, and they're just destroying them.
Right. Yeah. So you've done all of this crazy stuff to get there, and then once you're there, you still have to be amazing.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think on that note, we'll cut to break, and we'll come back in just a minute or two, and we'll talk about our 3, 2, 1s. Okay.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much, Ross.
Welcome to our new podcast. Welcome to our new podcast.
This isn't working.
Agreed. I think we're going to have to do it turn by turn.
Well, now that you mention it, we are a brand new RPG video game podcast.
Our very existence hinges on turn-based gaming.
So join us on the Turn by Turn podcast, where we'll be talking about
Pokemon, Fire Emblem, Golden Sun, Shining Force, Mother, and so many more.
It's your turn to come and join us.
Jake, have you ever been looking for a definitive Nintendo ranking and can't seem to find it because it's just everybody's own opinion?
Honestly, all the time, Sam.
Well, I'm looking for someone to give us the answers.
Wait, you mean like a podcast made by 2 young, handsome men where they create a definitive top 5 list of all things Nintendo?
Should we just do it ourselves?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Let's give it a shot. I'm Sam.
And I'm Jake.
And at Top 5 Nintendo, I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And then we're going to duke it out and see what the real top 5 is.
And we are back from the break. Ross, I'm having a blast.
Likewise.
I'm loving this. I think I have to I think I have to be a bit more brief with my 3, 2, and 1 here as we go forward, because I'm just getting so excited talking about all this. But I guess we'll just see where the conversation takes us.
It's all hunky dory on this end, man. So keep it up.
I think. So as we said in the beginning of the episode, I thought maybe we would switch and I would go first for the second half so that you can kind of have the final say there or whatever. But it turns out that my 3, I actually kind of forgot this. I thought it was a little higher up on my list. Is my Wind Waker speedrun moment. So I actually have in my notes, not the castle barriers, Skip.
Oh, that's funny.
It's right there.
That one's terrible. Who would ever put that on their top 5 list?
Well, I wanted to. I actually thought I just didn't want to do 2 Wind Wakers on my list. I wanted to try to spread it out a little bit into different games.
Fair enough.
So this one here, let's see, this one I actually did also have to research. So this one I have to kind of almost refamiliarize myself with a little bit. There was right. This one's kind of new. There is a exploit that can happen in Wind Waker where if you're playing the Wii U version, Wind Waker HD, and actually the guy who figured this out was Legendo Flink.
Legend of Flink?
Legend of Flink with 2 Ks. Did you just hear what I just said?
Legend of Flink's actually my best friend. Of course I'm kidding.
That guy right there?
Legend of Flink. 2 Ks at the end, though.
2 Ks. It threw me off.
Flink.
And then, Legend of Link with 2 Ks noticed that you can, there's an exploit with Wind Waker HD where, so how familiar are you with like Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD? They're the 2 that came out on the Wii.
I never played the HD version, I just played the original. So I'm not sure if there's any changes or anything like that.
No problem. Great. So there's with the Wii U was trying to be what the Switch ultimately did right. And the Wii U tried to make it so that a lot of these games, specifically Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, which actually ran the same engine, which is pretty crazy, you could play them up on your TV. And they wanted to embrace the Wii U-ness of it all. So if you play on the TV, you can kind of see your items down on the screen on your controller. But also, they kind of, Nintendo wanted to have their cake and eat it too, so to speak. And if you wanted to, before the Switch existed, pretend like you have a Switch and just play the game on your Wii U controller on the couch while someone else is watching TV or something, you could also do that. But to do that, of course, they didn't have the dual screen experience. So on a Wii U gamepad, they call it, if you pause, you're getting a single screen experience. So in a Zelda game, you have your gameplay and you pause and it brings up your item menu or whatever, right? Of course, on the dual screen experience, when you pause, it would like freeze the TV version and kind of did a little like crosshatchy thing, and then you'd kind of pick your items down below. I think you might have even been able to pick your items live while you stayed in the game, but you could pause too. Okay. Anyway, I digress. Apparently, if you play Wind Waker HD with a Pro controller, in other words, you're playing a single screen experience on the main screen, not compared to a single screen experience on your Wii U gamepad. So functionally, you might think that's the exact same experience, right? They're just putting on one screen or the other screen.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously playing on the screen with a gamepad is a different experience because you got the dual screen thing, right? Okay, fine. The code is different. Anyways, if you're playing the single screen experience on the TV for Wind Waker HD and you're playing as the GameCube control or the Wii U Pro controller as your dominant controller and execute the item button, the pause button by touching the screen on your gamepad at a certain point on a certain frame of entering a room, the game will keep running by accident behind your like item selection screen. This is an exploit because you might recall, as I was kind of stumbling along here, I spoke to if you're playing the dual screen experience, the top screen might keep running and you can do your item select. Get it? So for some reason, there's some little frame when you enter any room, it misses that check. It misses checking that variable or something. So Legend of Link figured this out and thought that was interesting. But then a little bit later, Linkus7 decided to figure out a way to use that as a speedrun exploit. And essentially, the quick version of this is that if you do it in a room which would otherwise trigger a cutscene. Let's talk about Wind Waker. Let's say you're going up that staircase, going into that final boss battle room. It's another one of these like Ocarina of Time Mido things where you have to make sure your character is exactly in the right spot. So they've created a metric of like stand in front of this pole, swing your sword so it bounces you back so many pixels, then jump to the left twice, and then like pull out your shield and put it back because it shoves your character up 2 more pixels or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know how this works. That gives you the appropriate unit to like when you do a sword. Now when you do a power swipe, it executes the. It pushes Link past the barrier and triggers the door or something, right? Okay, fine. So that's the way they can kind of quantify it and measure if you're in the right place instead of, it's just like your Wind Waker castle barrier break where they had to figure out if you have this star on this part of the screen, you look this way, you're in the right geometry. So the quick version here is, oops, sorry, I bumped my mic. The quick version is that you can if you go into in a room, doing a lot of this from memory right here. If you go into a room which would have a cutscene, and some of these cutscenes are 3, 4, 5 minutes long in Wind Waker, especially towards the end, it will run in the background in this wacky pause menu thing. And the thing that's weird is the controls still are executing in the game, and they're dual executing on the, I guess you could say, your item select menu. So you're pushing left, your little icon moves, but Link might run left to behind the screen. You can't see it happening. The quick I keep saying the quick version because I'm trying to say this a little quicker. But essentially what it boils down to is if you then save your game by pushing down, left, and right or whatever, navigating through the menus to save your game, and you go back to that save file, you actually Link starts in the room which he entered from, you could say. It's getting a little complicated here. Which he enters from, but when he goes into the next room, the variable that records that the cutscene has already executed has been triggered. So essentially, it allows you to go into a room and instead of watching a 4-minute, 5-minute cutscene of Ganondorf expositing, it cuts right to the Ganon puppet battle or something like that. Okay. So that's really what it all comes down to. This is a glitch that only works on Wind Waker HD because you need to kind of exploit this weird game mechanic running behind the thing. And you might even think like, well, geez, Louise, is that really worth it? I do all this crazy stuff. I get into the room. I get to skip the cutscene, but I also have to quit out of the file, go back in and load the file. But it has been decided that it is worth it. It's been decided that you can kind of, if you're quick enough going through these menus, you can do that in a matter of seconds. And if you're shaving off 4 or 5 minutes of cutscene, ultimately, and I might have written this down in my notes, they bring the menu up, reload the file. The scene's already triggered. Well, I don't have it in my notes here, but ultimately they found that they were able to shave, like 12 minutes off the speedrun or something like that. Which in the speedrun world, when you've already got your castle barrier break, and you've already got this game like squeezed as tight as it possibly can, it was a big one. And I think this happened recently. This happened like end of 2020 or something like that.
Anything to skip a cutscene, right?
Anything to skip a cutscene. Yeah, well, apparently, Roz, apparently, Mr. Skip all the Breath of the Wild cutscenes.
I think the biggest damage that the developers did to the speedrun community is allowing you to skip the cutscene. It seems like there was so much time spent avoiding the owl in Ocarina of Time, avoiding these cutscenes here. And now the developer said, you know what? Why don't you just hit plus? And we'll just go right on ahead with the with the mission here.
I mean, I think you're kind of onto something there. So I don't know. So what's interesting? The castle barrier break, they found it on the HD version, and the one I'm just discussing is the HD version. I wonder if the HD version, why would it be more sensitive to this kind of stuff? Essentially it's more sensitive to collision detection exploits is what it's really coming down to. And it doesn't, I know. The one I'm talking about right now obviously can't work on the original.
Because of the screen.
Yeah, you don't have this weird dual screen thing, which I'm sure they essentially patched into the code, which is why this exploit can even exist in the first place. Yeah. You know what I mean? That game was never designed to like run while the pause screen was up. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I was under the impression that the barrier break, while discovered on the HD, could be used on the original version. But don't quote me on that for especially.
That sounds kind of familiar, actually. I think you might be onto something there.
Yeah.
So that's my Wind Waker one.
That's your Wind Waker one.
Yeah,
I had barrier. You had cutscenes. We're all trying to avoid things.
The key mechanic there that I think is interesting, the key exploit that was interesting to me was this quirk about it being what would have been a feature of this dual screen experience.
Yeah, well,
it made the code a little loose, we could say.
That's right. And it reminds me, again, outside of Legend of Zelda, which was okay, I'm sure there's some overlap here, but Super Mario Odyssey has a 2-player mode, and a lot of the speedruns through Super Mario Odyssey are based on one person in 2-player mode, right? One controller for Mario, the second controller for Cappy, which is your partner for this game.
Yeah.
Helps you jump farther. And a lot of the hacks are based on going into 2-player mode and leveraging that to your advantage.
Wow.
Because you can kind of beat around the system a little bit more.
This is fascinating. I don't know anything about this. Does a single person hold both controllers?
So it's crazy. If you watch these streams, and I don't watch streams.
I will Google this.
Yeah, you got one person controlling Mario, the other controlling Cappy, and Cappy can go not infinite distance, but very much farther away from Mario, and then you can kind of use that to hack your way into different items you can capture versus it being 2 feet away from Mario at all times.
I suppose if you were 2 humans perfectly in sync as a team, it would be executable too. Is that right? Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah. But I think the speedrunning community was surprised. Or I shouldn't say surprised, but excited when they found out that they could do this, and then I think even more impressed when they found out that folks were doing it alone. But I do think some people do it as pairs.
Well, one of my honorable mentions was the 4 Swords speedruns, which I won't get into too much right now, but it does require multiple humans to be synced up to do certain things.
Oh, that's funny.
There is a bit of a synchronized swimming aspect to that one.
I bet. Yeah. I only played 4 Swords Adventure.
Yes,
which
me too.
For GameCube. I'd never played. There was one before that, right?
Yeah, there's one that came. I've got it up here on my shelf. It was like a pack-in with A Link to the Past Game Boy Advance edition.
Okay.
And they were trying to, they wanted everybody to plug their Game Boys in together and play this like quick little thing. I think it's only like 3 or 4 worlds. I did play a lot of 4 Swords Adventures.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a creative game. I thought it was a great game. I didn't get much utility out of connecting the Game Boy. I think you could connect it to the GameCube if you wanted to as like a bonus.
Well, yes. Yeah. 4 Swords Adventures, the way I played it was like the way the developers envisioned it. We literally had 4 Game Boy Advances, all of them plugged into the GameCube. We all had our own screens.
Oh, wow.
And we had the big screen. It was like we were nerding out hardcore.
I was nerding out in that I was playing it alone in my basement. One person.
Oh, wow. So you had the whole thing where like the Game Boy Advance screen kind of imposes on the main screen, I think, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so, when you control one person at a time, I am controlling one person at a time. But I feel like that was a minority of the game. You'll see more information.
I tell you what, if we ever get, it's inevitable. There's going to be a 4 Swords Adventures like episode on this show. I have no idea when it would happen because we have to track down 4 Swords. There was one at a used game store here in Chicago a few months ago.
Oh, interesting.
And I think it was like $60 or $70, and I passed at the time. And I'm kind of kicking myself, even though I don't like spending a lot of money on. I'm not much of a collector, but I guess I'm kind of stingy when it comes to used games. But that one was the one that kind of slipped through. Nevertheless, I feel like an episode on another Zelda podcast where we get 4 people together, we play it for an afternoon, and then record the episode. We do a round table discussion.
Yeah.
If we are, since you've played the game in first player mode, you'd be informed about the game. And if you're in town or in the area, whenever this hypothetically happens, a year from now or 2 years from now, I think we got to include you in that.
Absolutely.
That'd be a blast.
I would love that. It makes me think, you have the connector, right? There was a special connector, GameCube to Game Boy.
Yep.
The one thing I think about, and we're able to hack, right? We're able to hack now where, this example you're bringing up where you have the 2 screens for the HD version. I'm wondering, has anyone ever tried to use the Game Boy printer where you can take a picture of something with your Game Boy? Did you ever have this?
Well, I'm aware of the printer. Yes. Yeah.
Has anyone tried to use that for a hack? Has anyone tried to speedrun with the printer?
There is, I think there is a funky hack out there with the printer. Or at least the camera, the Game Boy camera.
The Game Boy camera, that's right.
Yeah, there's the camera's that big old cartridge thing. And remember, you could slide it back and forth. Then you could print those pictures to a printer, which was essentially receipt tape, I think. It didn't use actual ink. It used heat, I think. And,
interesting.
Yeah, to keep it a little safer for kids. You don't have to buy ink cartridges and all that kind of stuff.
That makes sense.
I think there are some wacky Game Boy, maybe Stop Skeletons from Fighting did an episode on like funky Game Boy camera exploits.
Yeah.
But I do have one more thing to say about 4 Swords Adventures. When we played it, we actually we had, between the collection of my friends and I, we had 2 GameCubes and 3 Game Boy Advances. We did not actually technically have the 4 Game Boy Advances, as I kind of painted this picture a few minutes ago.
I feel like I've been lied to.
However, my GameCube had a Game Boy player connected to it. Because this is around the time Metroid Zero Mission was coming out, and I really liked my Game Boy player. To this day, I love my Game Boy player. I still use it. And so what we did, and that has full Game Boy Advance connectivity, including the adapter cord. So we ended up taking one television. We had that be our main 4-player experience. Right next to it, we set up another smaller television that we just kind of pulled up from another room and connected my GameCube to that, posing as a Game Boy Advance. So we took the Game Boy player, plugged in the Game Boy Advance, data port connector, plugged that in as a controller to the other GameCube. So the other GameCube thought that GameCube was a Game Boy Advance. And then the other 3 were actual Game Boy Advances.
And it worked all the way through.
Oh, it works. It was so much fun.
I cannot believe it.
The one thing we did is the person that was on the second television, I guess you could say, we made sure that was the link that had the map information. Because I think the others would get one of them would get tips on where treasures were. The other link would get tips. When you play multiplayer, each of the 4 players are getting their own specific information on their Game Boy Advance screen. And you have to talk to each other about where to go. Also, in boss battles, only one link gets information on the weak points and stuff like that. So
that's so interesting.
So the purple link or the green link can say to the other links "Oh, go for the big eye." And you're okay, it's a Zelda game. We already know go for the big eye.
Yeah,
but I'm just kind of joking there. So anyway, we did the map version. So at least we kind of had we had the main game. Okay, I'm getting way too into the weeds here. We had the main game, and then we had kind of the TV on the side functioning as the map. Game Boy Advance, Game Boy player pretending it was a Game Boy Advance. It was the coolest thing in the world. I'm just gonna say it.
It seems like an amazing team building exercise. And as you mentioned at the beginning, so I'm a graduate student. I'm getting my MBA right now, and the MBA courses are not really about learning, right? You of course you learn finance and marketing, but a lot of it is about that inner soul, that inner searching. I wonder if I should pitch. And there are different events they have for team building.
Yeah.
One of them is you can go through the fire department of New York, FDNY's training regimen for a day or two.
Yeah.
There are other things let's captain a small ship. Let's hike, let's backpack for 10 days in the desert.
Okay.
You're supposed to kind of build character. I wonder if I should pitch 4 Swords Adventure.
But only
gets a controller.
But only give them 3 Game Boy Advances.
No, give them 3 Game Boy Advances. Yeah. That's right.
And see what they do.
And let's see if these MBAs at the end of the day can figure this out, or if they're all going to be at each other's throats. I think
love
it's a great idea.
You might be onto something there, but you're going to have to find 4 Swords Adventures in some weird used game shop these days. But anyway, yes, that's great. I love it. That's wonderful. So that was my. Oh wait, no, we were on you, weren't we?
I think we're starting with you, right? You're doing 3, and then you're kicking it back.
I did my 3. Have you not done your 3?
I haven't done my 3 yet.
I'm having so much fun. I'm losing track. Why don't you tell me your 3?
All right. So my number 3, it's a 3 and an honorable mention because they're kind of similar to theme. The theme is fast travel.
Okay.
So the theme is fast travel. The honorable mention, which I'll start with, is Wind Waker. Infinite swimming or infinite momentum swimming. Have you seen this?
No, I have not.
So the idea, and I don't know the exact technicals here, but the idea is you basically throw Link into the water, do some sort of clipping, do some sort of glitches, but basically you build up speed and build up momentum over a 5-minute period, 5 or 10 minutes.
Holy cow.
And for some, somehow they're able to keep Link from drowning. They've severely limited that timer that goes down. However, he is doing the gurgling noises. So you're watching the speed run, right? You're watching Link build up momentum, so he's going back and forth between 2 walls on this starter island. He's building up speed for 5 minutes. He's drowning the entire time. He's doing that thing.
Oh my gosh.
And then you just slingshot across the map, to wherever you're going. No boat, within 10 seconds. It's just a hilarious visual that you're drowning this young kid, right? It's young Link. Right, it's not an adult. Young Link who's drowns for 5 minutes building up speed, and then he just slingshot him across the map.
I wonder one thing that would be super cool is to see how those islands load, because the part of the speed of the boat was or rather
to render.
The speed in which they could load and render the islands partly dictated the speed of the boat in the Wind Waker GameCube version.
Yeah, and that's a great transition to my true number 3. That was just an honorable mention.
Oh, okay.
Breath of the Wild bullet time bounce BTB.
Yes, I love it. Talk about it.
So, the bullet time bounce, again, I'm not super clear on all the specifics, but you go into bullet time, which is the slow motion, right? You're in the air, you pull out your bow and arrow, it's called bullet time. And if you land directly on the head of an enemy in a certain angle, it'll launch you across. Yeah. And to your point about rendering, the game freezes every 3 or 4 seconds or so that you're in the air as it's trying to load the next area. But you take the biggest game that the Legend of Zelda franchise has ever had, right? Breath of the Wild, biggest map ever. And they do some great things, right? You can warp to all these different shrines. There's 120 in the game. But yet it's still faster to go into this bullet time, bounce on someone's head, and then whip across the map. And I just love that.
Yeah, the exploit there is something about when you go into the bullet time, the time variables, they obviously dial down or dial up depending on your perspective.
Oh, interesting.
But I think the base, the exploit comes from like the base, the other physics, they don't also dial down or up. You know what I mean? So like the momentum of hitting something gets exponentially amplified. My cat is literally trying to come into the studio right now. He tried one door and now he's clawing at the other door. But
smart guy.
He's gonna bounce back and forth and we're gonna deal with it. But I think that's what it was. And that was another thing where like the developers probably thought like this will never happen.
No one will hit this cap.
Yeah.
The same thing with the infinite momentum swimming in Wind Waker. Who would thought Link's gonna shoot across the map at 1,000 miles per hour? We don't need we don't need maximum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And then here we go. We have this poor kid, 7 years old, just woke up, abandoned his sister, and is being
you're putting it into the lore here. You're kind of making this canon. This is hysterical. I love it.
You know what? I'd like to think it is. I like to see the manga
of that.
The mega print of the infinite momentum. Link. I don't think he abandoned the sister. He was going to go after the sister, right? She got captured by the bird.
She gets captured. Yeah.
You know, he was going to save her. It was not a bit. He abandoned the grandmother. Grandmother was fine.
The grandmother.
She was on the island. She was kicking.
She was. If you go back, she's a little sad, but you can give her like some special soup and she gets a little more happy.
Did they ever talk
in
about
that game? I don't know if they ever talk about it.
Because clearly there's a mom and a dad, right? He had to be born from somewhere.
Well, I will say we were talking a little bit earlier this episode about the Twilight Princess manga. And in Twilight Princess, Link is also essentially an orphan, or at least it's not spoken to. His parents aren't spoken about.
Yeah.
But in the manga, they do explore it a little bit more. He does come from a place before Ordon Village, and I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. But that is an awesome example of how the manga expands on things, but still feels canonically accurate.
Yeah,
and it was great. It was cool to learn that he actually you wouldn't know this from the game, but traveled to Ordon Village only recently, I guess you could say, and did have a family and all that kind of stuff. Ocarina. Oh, you're perfectly fine. Ocarina of Time Link in a German comic book that's technically canon. He did have a dad that was a knight in the Hylian army, and the dad this is before the game. The dad goes out to fight the war, and the mom is scared, and so she runs into Kokiri Forest. And I guess in Kokiri Forest, Hylians or humans turn into plants, which is also why it's weird that Link doesn't.
Yeah.
But she runs into the forest and basically gives Link to the Deku Tree, and Deku Tree says, I'll protect him.
Oh.
Also, by the way, you're going to turn into a tree now. And then she basically perishes and turns into a tree. It's a little crazy. Some speculate, and this is I hope it's not too twisted, but some speculate that the treehouse that Link lives in Kokiri Forest is his.
Don't tell me that.
Is his mother.
That's disgusting. This is your mother on the walls. Oh, that's her arm. That's her head. What a beautiful smile she has on this roof that I've now put out of my head.
This is getting darker than Majora's Mask. Oh my gosh, the cat. I tell you what. Cat. So let's see. We've got number two. Number 2 is fun for me. Number 2 is a fun one. Do you have any closing comments about your? The bullet time stuff can be exploited in other ways too, where you'll see videos of people sending. I forgot what the robots are called. Oh, guardians, flying them up into the air. Maybe they can exploit the same kind of thing. I don't know. I'm going to let my cat in. So you are going to vamp for 10 seconds. Okay.
Vamp.
Yeah. Vamp is a term for when you can't have silence on the show. Can't have radio silence. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about why you're excited about some of the physical exploits that can happen in the systems of Breath of the Wild?
Sure. I'm vamping for the listeners at home. I think that the physical exploits in Breath of the Wild, it's a whole new engine that has the most realistic graphics, the most realistic physics we've ever seen, and it is still bendable like a twig within a month of being released. And then you have all these gamers.
I tell you what, for a vamp, that was pretty good.
I panicked. I don't know if it was very good, but I appreciate
you went meta and you were like, I am vamping, and then you went for it. And
that's
it worked.
Right. Yeah.
And now the cat's inside and he's not scratching on our door and everything's fine. All right, so I'm going to go into my number 2.
I'm excited.
It's a weird one. So earlier in this episode, we were talking about any percents, 100%, and this category that I kind of learned of really only recently, maybe within the last week when I knew we were going to do this episode. A low percent run. Can you guess what low percent might mean? I think you can probably.
Well, I think you defined at the beginning.
Oh, did I?
It's generally defined by the community, and it is it is different for each game.
Oh yeah, fair enough. And so typically, a 100%, it's usually determined that you finish the game and you also acquire and do all the things that are part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a collectathon, you've collected all the things, all the items. Sometimes the community decides if you really need to get 900 Korok seeds or not in Breath of the Wild. And sometimes they say you have to, and it depends. Okay, fine. But for the most part, it means that you're getting, in a Zelda game, it would mostly mean you're getting every single special item and all of that. All the shrines in Breath of the Wild would probably be a 100% for sure. And an any percent is as long as you can get to, we'll just say, the credits.
Mm-hmm.
A low percent, so any percent means glitches are okay, but in a 100%, a glitch which allows you to skip maybe not getting the hook shot, so to speak, wouldn't work.
That's right.
Yeah. So that is more, the 100% sometimes have to rely a little bit more on I shouldn't say just raw skill, but like in-game skill inside the rules of the game, not exploiting the rules of the game. Both take a tremendous amount of skill. But a low percent is if you can get to the end of the game, who can get to the end of the game the fastest and collect the least amount of things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, in the original The Legend of Zelda, I've been referencing that one a few times today. There's kind of famously like a spare key in the first dungeon that you really technically don't need, and you can carry it with you to another dungeon, which is just kind of it's not a glitch, but it was just like maybe an oversight. It just stays in the data set, and you can walk around with these extra keys, stuff like that. So sometimes you can imagine if you could collect, theoretically or hypothetically, if you could collect 2 or 3 of these keys, you might be able to skip an entire dungeon later and not get. Okay, anyway, I digress. I'm going to focus back in here. So the idea is, with a low percent, can you get to the end of the game and collect the least amount in Twilight Princess's case, activate the least amount of warp zones or those portals, collect the least amount of proper items, do the least amount of dungeons, do the least amount of whatever, and get to the credits. And who can do it the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
So there is I wrote down the names of some of these speedrunners so that I can at least reference them, but I am excited to tell you about this tale. So Twilight Princess, let me put it this way. The Twilight Princess low percent speedrun, the fastest it's been played at this point is a rockin' 24 hours. It takes 24 hours plus to get to the end of the game and do this low percent. Basically, there's a couple exploits where you can skip a number of dungeons. The low percent is like literally you only get 3 or 4. It's nuts. It's like you finish the whole game with only like 7 things that happened out of what would probably otherwise be 20 or 30 things. The way it was discovered is that let me get the names up here. I want to make sure I speak to this. It's currently held by Marco, at least at the time of this recording. It has to happen on the GameCube version. It cannot happen on Twilight Princess HD, as I understand it. And 24 hours and 59 minutes. Anarakis actually is the person who has executed this. There's only like 3 or 4 of these on the actual like date, the official scoreboard of low percents for Twilight Princess. There's only 3 people that have even tried it so far because it takes a long time. It requires the headline could be it requires 17 hours of staring at rupees.
Oh,
yep, right. So basically, what happens is the story goes there was a person playing Twilight Princess, and they. You know how in Zelda games, whenever you get an item, this camera goes around the chest and it comes up and then holds up the item and it kind of magically rotates weirdly over his hands. This is like every Zelda game.
The only thing that can move me these days is watching me unlock a new item. I mean, it gives me enough energy. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, cool. Well, in Twilight Princess, for some reason, it was decided that every time Link picked up a blue or a white rupee, which is there's some of the higher ones, he would still kind of pick it up and the camera would zoom in and he'd kind of do his little hover animation while this thing rotated.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. What happened was a player who I think was streaming or not, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. A player picked up some item out of a chest, and for whatever reason, didn't like pause the game or save the game or leave the game. They just kind of turned the TV off and went away. And the next day they came back and turned their TV on and noticed that Link was he had gone to a chest. The camera had spun around the day before. Camera had spun around. Link picked up his whatever it was, hook shot or double claw shot or whatever it was. And he phases away from the chest and holds the item. A day later, Link was standing in the chest. Let's say he basically scooted backwards 5 feet in the game, and no one could figure out why. And so this guy posted this information and was like, "What's going on here with this?"
Someone's got to watch the footage.
Someone's got to watch that footage. Yeah, I don't know if he recorded it, but basically, after looking at the code and checking it all out, it turns out that Link's what's the expression when they're in like an animation cycle, but they're not doing anything. I'm kind of escaping me right now.
It's in an animation cycle where you're not doing anything.
Yeah, like a latent no, not latent. Well, I really can't remember the term right now, but it's like it's not an ambient animation, but it's the nothing. It's like when a character stands there, but they just kind of sway back and forth, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All right. These animations that just still show that the character's alive or whatever. So Link has an animation where he sways back and forth just a touch, as is the case for a lot of these animations. But apparently there's a glitch in the game where, let's just say for the sake of this conversation, it takes 24 frames for this. No, let's say 30. Let's just keep it on this 30 frame thing. It takes 30 frames for Link to execute one animation loop of him just standing there. For some reason in Twilight Princess, the game actually clicks out at like frame 29 and starts the cycle over. So it only executes 29 frames of this animation loop and then starts over.
Okay.
So every, I guess, if we're going with this 30 math, every 30, you're forward one cycle, right? I'm not saying this very well, but you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And essentially what it does is, because he leans back and forth, that 29th frame, for the sake of this conversation, pushes him back, we'll say, a pixel in the game, and collision detection isn't executed.
Oh, interesting. So he's kind of swaying, and you're saying because he doesn't take that 30th pixel or that 30th frame where he goes back,
right? He's
now forward.
Yeah. If you could imagine the character swaying forward and back, maybe only 2, 3, 4 pixels or whatever the unit of measurement is with the polygons. It's almost like it's like a check mark. If you take 5 steps back but only 4 steps forward, not 5 back, 5 forward, so to speak, eventually you start moving backwards, right?
So he's moving backwards. What happens?
He's moving backwards like 1 pixel every whatever it is, many hours. So basically what happens is, the way that these low percent speedrunners figured out what they could do is they found key points in the game where they could at least find a blue rupee drop from like a bad guy. And if they go to this rupee and these rupees and pick up in the correct orientation, for example, maybe they're back to a door, a Mido, so to speak, quote unquote, a Mido, they can maybe get through it. But the crazy thing is, so like one of them literally takes 7 hours. One of them is you pick up this blue rupee and it takes 7 hours for Link to slowly scoot back and clip through a door like in the Faron Woods so that he can go on to some temple and stuff like that. There's technically a bomb exploit in there, and there's like a save load and reload file and all that kind of stuff, and you can get in Faron Woods before collecting all these other things. But the crazy thing about this is that 3 or 4 times in this low percent speed run, you have to set the controller down for 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, for a total of 24 hours, which is like, 70% of this speed run is literally just waiting for Link to slowly nudge back a pixel to collect the least amount of items and clip through something. And also when he's in this animation cycle, once you finally push A or whatever it is to get back in the game, that's when they re-register collision detection. So if Link has already gone through this door, he's on the other side.
When you said 25 hours, the first thing I thought of is, where's this guy going to the bathroom?
Yeah, well, apparently he's got plenty of time to do play. He could probably do other speedruns in between waiting for this speedrun to finish.
That's right. He's practicing the clipping through whatever while he's clipping through a 7-hour process to get behind a door.
Yeah, it's true. Now, the crazy thing is all this stuff has to be documented, so it does have to be recorded and filed for like the 24 hours, 25 hour low percents. So I wanted to put a weird one in here, and I thought this was a weird one.
That is a weird one. The men who stare at goats, the Link who stares at rupees.
Yeah, you're right.
I love that Mido is now our token wall clipping.
Yeah, but it was great. I mean, you set it up.
Beat up.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so what do you have for your second?
All right, my number 2 here. I think I'm going back to the Ocarina of Time well here, so
Let's
to
do it.
speak, as it were. Wrong warping. Have you ever heard about wrong warping?
No.
So wrong warping, as I understand it, was an accidental discovery. I'll put it up there with the likes of penicillin, accidentally discovered when someone left a beaker with too many bacteria to grow overnight.
Absolutely.
I think all great inventions have been accidentally discovered. As much as I love to think innovation is great, I think a lot of it comes from just randomness.
I'm wondering if my number 1 is your number 2 and I'm calling it something different. Let's go for it. I'm
So my
captivated.
understanding of wrong warping in the original discovery was when Link is in Kokiri Forest, you go to the Deku Tree, you
Yes.
beat Goma. And when you then go into the portal, there's a way to overwrite what is the next pointer that you will go to, what's the next cutscene.
Oh,
Is that what
no,
you're
this-
thinking
no,
about?
No, this is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is that this was an accidental discovery. And so someone found out that you can skip to the next cutscene if you do a certain number of glitch, some sort of bomb, some sort of picking up ants, letting them drop, playing a song as soon as you get into the portal from Goma. You're looking at me puzzled.
No, I'm with you. I think mine uses the same exploit, so that I'm getting very excited.
Okay. And so what ended up happening is it turns out that in the directory of cutscenes, after Goma's is the tower collapse cutscene in the final act of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Yes.
And so someone accidentally discovered that you can skip to the next one. And the first time they tried it, they skipped to the final scene. And this alone shaved, minutes or dozens of minutes off the time, because all you had to do now is beat Goma and you could go right to the tower scene.
Yes.
And so it turned out there was some other issues, okay, how do you beat Ganon without a sword? But it turns out that they actually, if you can get past the first part of the battle, they actually will give you the sword when you get it back.
You're absolutely right.
And so then you don't have to worry about that. So now you just have to beat the first half, and you can use a big Deku stick. You can use some of the power crouch stabbing glitch where you basically have the jump attack power that's infinitely moving with the Deku stick that won't break. And then now you've kind of beaten the game as a kid.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so what I love about it is that
do you load in as a kid?
You load in as a kid. That's
amazing.
The thing. And one of the parts I love about it is that the camera, because you're a kid, is actually an inch too high. Right, so you're not at height level. So you look at these funny speed runs, and Zelda is perfectly in frame.
Yeah.
But then young Link, you can only see the top of his head.
Of course,
because they did not adjust the camera upward.
Right, yeah.
Because again, a developer is, who would think that I should reference this to the size of Link? I'm just gonna make it static because I assume Link is adult Link.
Yeah.
But wrong warping, I think that's my number 2.
Wrong warping. I never heard it called that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I was aware a bit of that. So this leads right into my 1 here. I was aware of that kind of like skip to from. I never knew exactly how it works, but I knew you could go from the forest to the castle. You'd hear about it just in the community. And apparently, I did a little bit of research. I found that very, very recently. So this is done with a process which I've learned. I didn't know this before us studying for this episode. It's called arbitrary code execution.
That's my number 1. Is that your number 1?
For Ocarina of Time?
For Ocarina of Time.
Warping into the credits?
Correct.
Let's do
That's
it.
my number
We
1.
got the same number 1.
Is that your number 1?
That's my number 1. Warping into the credits. Look, we're showing each other our phones. Arbitrary code execution. Yeah. So that's let's do it. Let's talk about it. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's the craziest.
This is like the perfect pinnacle coming together here. We have the same number 1.
Discovered 2 years ago, right? A year and a half ago.
Apparently January 2020.
Yeah. I think for people at home who have not heard of it, but have seen The Matrix, it is like The Matrix. You go into the code and become Neo, being able to pre-program anything you want.
Arbitrary code execution is fascinating. There is a video out there of a person who figured out how to rewrite variables of item holds in Super Mario World. And then you can literally, what they did was after they were able to break into the code through writing this, oh my God, it's just insane. They literally coded, and I'm using quotation marks here, but they coded the game Flappy Bird into Super Mario Brothers using arbitrary code execution inside the game. No hacks.
Absolutely insane.
So it's basically what happens is you can find a tiny little exploit. You find a tiny little way that an item, maybe there's a variable that caches data or is holding a data set, and it can cycle through a data set. And if you can somehow make that, it's a little bit like this SnapGrid stuff that I was talking about with Link in the original Legend of Zelda. If there's a spot where if the code doesn't line up and the game says, I know, I don't want to break, I will then deduce X, Y, or Z if I see this thing break. And you can somehow make that variable break by doing a complicated series of events in the game of inputs and whatnot. You can start to rewrite those variables. And that's what arbitrary code execution is. And that's kind of what they do for, I guess, what you called wrong warping. I think there's a version of that. But, you hit this, you do that, you jump here, you do this, you do all these crazy things. But the end of the credits warp, you also need the ocarina because you're rewriting. You can execute certain coordinates while you're in the ocarina camera, I guess. Are you aware of this at all much?
Not quite.
Okay. I mean, I'm just getting excited right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, arbitrary code execution is almost it's almost crazier than cheats and hacks and everything else because you're staying inside the game and you're Neoing it. You're
the god in the game.
Yeah.
You have the power to write code by moving your body to different angles as if you're typing on a keyboard.
Within the rules of the game.
That's right. And what I love about ACE, arbitrary code execution, is I assume you've watched these videos.
I have.
It looks like an insane person.
Yes.
For 6 minutes, you're picking up a rock, you're putting down a rock.
Yep.
Maybe it's like the men who stare at goats, the guy who stares at rupees.
Mm-hmm.
You're rolling backwards, you're killing yourself, you're doing what appears to be the most random actions. And I've watched the narrated, annotated versions of these, and I still don't understand what they're doing at all.
Right.
And yet then all of a sudden, you warp to end credits. After 3 minutes of picking up a rock and putting it back down.
Yep.
It's nonsensical and yet is the fastest way to beat the video game, at the time of this recording.
Now, apparently also as I was doing my research on this, it was theorized. So it was kind of back-end designed in that people looked at the source code and kind of traced back how they could maybe change some of these variables and start, writing some of this code. And then it was performed by I forget the expression, but you know how sometimes you can do an automated tool assisted. Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was performed by a tool assisted just to see if it would work.
Yeah.
And I think that was back in January. And then I don't have the date here in my notes, but then shortly thereafter, a human was able to execute it.
Yeah. And I think I watched 100% with glitches run, where essentially what the person does is they go to a part of the map. Again, I don't know why. And they open up a treasure chest 20 times.
Oh, wow.
And over the course of opening the treasure chest 20 times, they get basically every item in the game. And that's where they beat 100%. But it's just with glitches is to open up this treasure chest with the arbitrary code execution.
So this one has something to do with, I know you need to, somehow they have to leave Kokiri Forest and get to the castle to at least get the ocarina. Because you need the ocarina because you don't really need the ocarina. You need the ocarina camera. Because when the ocarina camera's up, you can play your ocarina and it changes the inputs and it changes things. And that's another one of these maybe weak points where the code isn't looking at certain variables, but is looking at others, and you can exploit that. So you need your slingshot and the ocarina for some reason to execute some of these wacky things. And you're right. Link will take 2 steps to the right, and then he'll throw a rock, and then he'll hit his sword, and then he'll pull out the ocarina. And there's something where you can use the ocarina camera, and it'll push Link around, and there's crazy things where one of the ones that I watched, they did have some coordinates mapping on the top of the screen, so at least the human could kind of see where they were, because you can't literally see sometimes. There's times where Link pulls up the ocarina inside Kokiri Forest and then runs away, and you can't even see him anymore, but has to do other things now to execute that code. It's almost impossible. It's almost hard to talk about, but it's very cool.
It feels like steroids for a sports competition, right? If you're a power lifter at the Olympics, you're going to be tested for human growth hormone and other performance enhancing drugs. And yet the speedrunning community, I consider ACE to be maybe a drug, maybe a steroid, or maybe having that camera open so you can see the points. Maybe that's more of a steroid. That's a better analogy.
Oh, yeah.
And yet they've embraced it because they want the best athletes they can possibly find, and they want to be doing the best they can. They're giving steroids. They're giving arbitrary code execution and seeing what happens. And I think it's wonderful.
I think technically it stays within the rules in that they're not bringing external code manipulation.
That's right. There's no Game Shark. There's nothing on top. However, what I want to see is arbitrary code execution. You told me that there's a Flappy Bird within a Super Mario game.
Yes.
I want to see someone create a Legend of Zelda original with arbitrary code execution in Ocarina of Time. I want to play it at one of the Bazaar games or somewhere like that. I want someone to program an entire computer and see what happens.
I'll send you the link to the Flappy Bird one. It's nuts. But anyway. That's cool. Wow, man. So we had the same number one.
I mean,
that's great.
I think the fact that this video game, and I think we kind of started here, maybe full circle, came out in the late 90s, and yet people are still hacking away at it and have finally found a way to program it. I don't know if that's the peak, right? 6 minutes or 7 minutes, whatever the world record say is. It feels like a peak to me. But we probably would have said that when it was 10 minutes, and probably would have said it when it was 20 minutes.
Right, yeah, right,
probably
exactly.
when it was 40 minutes. But the fact that you can code now, it feels like the game is broken, right? You've broken it in half.
You
at
can
that
code
point.
to some degree, and it can only go from there. And sometimes in speedruns, those early Nintendo 64 games it was in a time where 3D gaming was still in its infancy, and sometimes just metaphorically speaking, hacking these pieces together in real life. The developers creating these games, they're just shoving pieces together and hoping it all works, because even they're learning how 3D engines work and 3D math works and all that kind of stuff, that a lot of the Nintendo 64 games are pretty glitchy or exploitable. But then again, I guess we're still talking about a million things in Wind Waker and all this other stuff.
I was going to say, we're doing bullet time bounce. We're doing a game, and with Breath of the Wild, it is a game design that you could beat in 10 minutes, because you can go straight to Ganon's Castle. Nothing's ever stopping you from going to Ganondorf's Castle. And they're equally, I don't know if they're equally as glitchy, but you're absolutely right. There are glitches. Every video game just will always have glitches. I don't know why. I'm not enough of a coder to understand.
Well, isn't it funny? Because what it was is in the early days, I think this could kind of cap the whole thing off. In The Legend of Zelda, the exploits weren't even they were kind of a glitch, but they were the fact that there wasn't random. You could kind of if you could a brilliant mind, a serious mind, a beautiful mind. If you could a beautiful mind it, like the movie, if you could really see what the path you needed to do, you could do it. With the Nintendo 64 games, it could be that there's these kind of code exploits and the glitchy, the whole game, if you're being frank, is duct taped together, so to speak, with code. And then what happens is the exploits in like Breath of the Wild aren't necessarily because the code's duct taped together, but it's because they have 9 or 10 systemic or systems really running on top of each other. And then those can exploit each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm clipping through stuff in Breath of the Wild is kind of old school glitching, but like the bullet time bounce, all that stuff's just a system on a system on a system.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's even more complicated.
It's exciting. And I guess Benjamin Franklin said, right, there's only 2 things certain in life, death and taxes.
Okay.
I would say there's only 2 things certain in any Legend of Zelda game. Number 1, it's going to be amazing. Number 2, someone's going to try to break it apart and race it as fast as possible.
I like it very much. Yeah. That's cool. Well, Ross, this was a blast.
Absolutely. I have one more honorable mention.
If we have more time.
Please. It's an honorable mention. It's for a category of speedrun.
It's a category?
It's a category of speedrun. So it's Breath of the Wild. It's a bit of a meme category. I'm not sure if you've heard of it before. Any guesses about where I'm going with this?
A meme category. So something to do with I know there's one where when I think memes, I think of like Link's costumes or something like that. Is it anything like that? Wait, you just nodded.
It's close enough.
Oh,
it's actually not very close at all. But I'm the guest here. I feel like I should give a little bit your way. So you may recall, in order to 100% the game, you have to get all the shrines. In order to get all the shrines, there is one particular shrine which is very difficult. There are many of them, but in Kakariko Village, you have to solve all of the side tasks in Kakariko Village before you can finally get this main task to unlock the final shrine.
Yeah.
And so all the side tasks are completed. You find out that Pyra?
Yes, I know where you're going with this.
Right. She loses the orb that she's been watching the entire game, which we know as players, will unlock another shrine because we always see these.
Yeah, we recognize it.
We recognize them. And so the meme category is who can sleep with Pyra the fastest.
What?
Because in the narrative of the game, you spend the night with her as a protector because she's so nervous when she's lost this ball that someone's going to come after her.
Oh.
And so you kind of open the door, go into the room, and then it cuts to black. And the meme is that you're sleeping with Pyra.
I see.
You're not, of course, there's a bit of a double-edged sword here. So my honorable mention is for the category for the wild devils who came up with fastest person to sleep with an NPC.
I see. Yeah, there's definitely some inference there that needs to happen. But I get it. Well, there are like actually to speak to like weird categories in speedruns. There are things like. There are ridiculous ones out there for the fun of it. It's almost becoming postmodern in a way where it's like, who's the first person to collect 50 bananas and stuff. I mean, that stuff there are some like really wacky ones out there.
People love that. I mean, Pokemon has the Nuzlocke challenge, right? If a Pokemon dies, you release them to the wilds.
If they like faint or whatever?
If they faint, you have to treat it as if they died. And so you have to go to your PC and release them into the wild. And a bunch of other concerns as well. I just think gaming communities, they're very creative and they always come up with fun ways. But anyways,
My goodness.
fastest to sleep. That's all. I'll end it.
Well, anyway, Ross, let's see. If people would like to reach out to you, is there any social that you'd like to share or anything like that?
Not really.
If that's a no, that's
but,
okay.
But I love, if you guys had a good time, leave some more reviews on the Apple Podcast, leave some more reviews on Instagram, DM people. I know David loves hearing it. So
Fantastic. Yeah. If they have thoughts on speedruns, certainly leave some comments and I'll be happy to read them in future episodes, of which you will most likely hear. Ross, I think that'll be really exciting.
fantastic.
And hopefully maybe we find a reason to get you back in here again. I want it to be the Four Swords Adventures episode, but boy, I think that one's a long ways off because we got to find that game.
We'll find it.
All right.
We'll have some fun. Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you so much. People can find the show at Another Zelda Pod on Twitter, Another Zelda Podcast on Instagram. AnotherZeldaPodcast.com is our website. You can go to Facebook, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Simply search Another Zelda Podcast. You'll find us on all those places. And as I mentioned, our website, AnotherZeldaPodcast.com, you can go there to read blog posts, see previous episodes. We have our whole library up there, and also find links to our Patreon page where you can participate in the video-only version, which we have right now going for our Magical Sword people. Hey, everybody. They're watching us record in the studio right now, and we have a couple other tiers that have some nice features and offers as well, including digital wallpapers for your phones and your computers, which I make myself, Ross. I have a blast. I make them every single month. It's very, very cool. It's cool for me to do, I should say. I don't know if they are cool. I hope they're cool. And all of that. So, everybody, thank you so much. We will see you on the next episode. I believe, Ross, that if the schedule works out the way I think it is, I think Kate is back on the next episode. It might be Dan. I'm not sure. But we've got a few more episodes with Kate coming up. She's going to come to Chicago here and record with us. I'm very excited about that.
Fantastic. Looking forward to hearing it.
Indeed. All right, Ross, thank you so much and have a great night.
Likewise.